2021 was the all-time record number of cops murdered in the line of duty. All-time record number of cops murdered. And the wheels are coming off the bus and we don't even know it. I'll show you another little chart that kind of makes this come alive. The same data, the per capita increase from the Pew, but they included the 9/11 attacks. Here's 9/11, bounced back the next year. Here's 2020. It didn't bounce back the next year. So this whole idea that the cops are evil, the media, this was in the New York Times, but they said, oops, that points a finger right back at us.
Welcome to Aimpoint's Taking Aim podcast. I'm your host, Rich Nance. Here we'll take a deep dive into firearms culture and the Second Amendment lifestyle. From hunters to veterans, competitive shooters, police officers, tactical trainers, 2A advocates, and even some well-known celebrities, we'll cover it all. Today I'm sitting down with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He's a retired U.S. Army Ranger and former professor of psychology at West Point. His books and seminars have no doubt saved countless lives. He's considered by many the leading authority on human violence. Stay tuned. Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you keep an extremely busy schedule, and I'm very appreciative of you taking the time.
My pleasure, Richard. And I love the Aimpoint podcast dynamic where you're going, what you're doing.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Your background, writing for Guns and Ammo. I grew up reading Black Belt and Guns of Ammo.
Same.
And Ammo,
Yep.
So I figured if I ever appear on one of those, I made it.
and I've had a couple articles in Black Belt magazine back in the day too, which was really neat. Yeah. And I know you actually you do Hojutsu, right?
Hojutsu is the martial art of
the gun.
Yeah, I'm 68 years old, and I'm under no obligation to retreat. I go straight to the gun.
Yeah, no, that's
the old man's martial art.
That's the way to do it. And you know what I end up teaching a lot, Lieutenant Colonel, is integrating empty hand skills with the pistol, which is something that I think most people are either shooters or kind of fighters. And I think now we're getting in law enforcement, especially, where we're recognizing it's just one fight, just different tools. You have to be able to integrate that. You can't have a shooter or a fighter.
Shooting is our martial art.
Yes.
You want to learn the sword, Japan. You want to learn unarmed combat. Here you want to learn to shoot.
Sure.
We, without a doubt, far and away, this is our martial art. And the idea of striving for your next belt, Hojutsu, give it a shot. You'll be so glad. It's the best 3 days you'll ever spend on the range and doing this stuff, integrating the best kata, one kata, the black belt level with 3 weapons retention moves built in. You just love it.
Very interesting stuff. Hey, real quick. So here's your book on killing, which is the first of many of your books that I've read. This book absolutely blew my mind. It was recommended to me in the early 2000s. I was at Defensive Tactics Instructor School, and that's one of the books that they said that we needed to read. And I didn't know what to expect, when I started reading it, but absolutely amazing as far as the reluctance that humans typically have to killing, even to the degree that they would endanger themselves by not shooting an enemy combatant, by intentionally missing and that type of thing, and how we can train our good guys to overcome that aversion to killing. And then kind of on the flip side of that, it also talks about how you can have kids that may be already predisposed in some way to violence based on their upbringing or any number of factors. And then when they see hyper-violent video games and they're constantly exposed to this stuff, that can sort of desensitize them to violence, which is we want our good guys to be able to inflict violence, and we want our kids not to do that. So super interesting. I mean, there's so much to that book. You could read it 10 times and still learn something new.
It's really important. I'm working on a book with a convicted murderer, life sentence, called On Murder. And when you look at murder, and the numbers vary greatly, but there's about 50 murders a day in America, roughly 1 per state per day. Of course, it's not distributed that way. So if just 1 in a million, we're a nation of about 300 million killing age in human beings. If just 1 in a million is pushed over the edge, then that's an extra 300. Instead of 50 that day, just 1 in a million. And we accept those kind of risks with adults, alcohol, firearms, driving. It's when you talk about feeding this stuff to kids that we all can say, hey, time out.
And I definitely want to get into that more as we get further along. But I wanted to ask you how you got into the field of study of human violence. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I picked up this book for the first time 20 years ago, or whatever it was, and I walked up to the counter at the Barnes and Noble, they looked at me like they needed to call the police, and I'm like, no, it's not what you think. But anyway, I'm sure when you first started researching this stuff, you didn't have the resources that we have now from a lot of the research that you've done. So what made you interested in this field of study? And then also what kind of resources did you have to educate yourself?
Yeah. Well, I enlisted 82nd Airborne Division, young paratrooper, sergeant, starting in 1974. We had Vietnam vets all around us. And the key thing we wanted to know is what combat's going to be like. I mean, that's what we're here for. We're going to put our lives on the line. What's it going to be like? And the crazy thing is they wouldn't say. It was like this taboo topic. But fast forward, 8 years or so, young Captain Grossman, getting a grad degree en route to teach at West Point, I'd ask the question and they would tell me. And I looked at every available, I did, in grad school, you get whole semesters of research, and every written product humanly available, crazy things like the Soldier of Fortune magazine. A Vietnam vet had every issue of Soldier of Fortune, which in that time was the only place veterans could speak about their experiences. And I realize, and I would make the analogy, it's very much like sex, very intimate, private dynamic. If you walk somebody and say, hey, how's the sex life going? How many times you and the wife get it on? Hey, you don't tell them. But if Masters and Johnson in some scholarly study, you tell them, you might even tell them the truth. And so the first time in human history, somebody really sat down and asked, what's it like to combat? What's it like to kill? And I thought that it all revolved around the act of killing, and killing's a big deal and it's important. But what I realized as my training evolved and as time went by, that the most important part is those who fully prepare themselves, killing's not that big a deal. And the single best way to prepare yourself is hunting, right? But what happened was my class evolved into covering all the things I got in non-combat. And then 9/11 happened. And my son just retired after 9 combat tours, Spec Ops, 3 Bronze Stars. And this is the book I wrote for my son going to the first combat tour. This is what I wanted him to know. I got a grandson deployed to Kuwait right now, Intel guy, smart guy. And again, this is the book I wanted him to read before he joins. And so on killing, but at the heart of the matter of this, when I was teaching in Ukraine, across that nation, terrible, terrible, horrible war. In just a few years, more loss of life than all of Vietnam, more loss of life than Korea. As a ratio to their nation, far more loss of life than World War II. I've got a brief window to tell these guys something that I think can help, something that can save their life. What it was my grandson sitting in the audience about to go. And this is what I worked out of. And the key thing was tunnel vision and auditory exclusion. Now, hunters know they don't hear the shot, but they never talked about it. They all sat in a little silo. Ooh, that was weird. I didn't hear the shots. And they never talked about it. But when you start asking hunters, boom, it's like this universal dynamic, auditory exclusion. And then, of course, in combat, slow motion time, tunnel vision, memory gaps, memory distortions. And telling them about this was a critical component. And then,
because they know what to expect. They know what to expect. Otherwise, they're going to think something's wrong when they get that going. Absolutely. Yes. And in law enforcement, there's no other discipline within law enforcement community where I've learned that type of stuff. It was from your books and your research, and so widely accepted that in a sense you're a victim of your own success, and that your research has sort of become industry standard. So everybody sort of uses it, and probably if you're not careful, people will be quoting you and they won't even really know they're quoting you, type of thing.
So, we've seen a lot of that. And it's highest honor. Yeah. Scholarship is measured by how many times work has been cited by other works. And you can go to Google Scholar, scholar.google.com. And this book has been cited 3,700 times. Yeah. It's very, very few reach that scale. Wow. This has been cited like 600 times. Yeah. And yes, a lot of that's coming. It's coming back around. I trained all the Navy SEALs early in the war. I trained them the box breathing, 4-4-4 breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm seeing the SEAls. Oh, the good thing we use in combat is this, box breathing. And it never got back to me. I got it
Yeah.
from Gary Klukowicz. So
Mm-hmm.
the truth is, it's okay.
We
Just
do, yeah.
pass
We
on the
borrow.
info.
We
Yeah,
we
save those
certainly
lines.
borrow from each other, but it's always nice to give attribution. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I think when you give attribution, it makes you look smarter anyway. You know what I mean? It makes you look
yeah.
well researched as opposed to
Amen.
pretending you came
That's
up with it.
funny. My book, I had a Marine private send me an email from Iraq. He said, I'm dyslexic, haven't read a book since high school, couldn't put it down. So I figure if a dyslexic Marine's we
Wow.
hit the sweet spot. We
Yeah,
really.
that's
But it's
awesome.
the books that make it happen. People say, I read the book and I'm looking forward to the next
Yeah.
indented quote. Why would you not cite what you're doing? It just
Yes.
gives it greater scholarship, and
Yes.
everybody looks forward to it.
And
Just the privilege of reaching
oh
out
yeah.
and
And
grabbing
so
all these great ideas and pulling them together.
for me, when it started, my first introduction, your research was on killing, then on combat, and I think that's probably typical of most cops.
Yeah.
But it wasn't too long ago that I read on hunting, which you and I talked a little bit about this off screen. But it's crazy the parallels between hunting and tactical stuff. It's not an either or. It's almost like I talked earlier about the importance of integrating shooting with your unarmed skills. It's the same thing with this. Like your hunting is part of your tactics, and vice versa. So I just, it was a lot of great parallels that I saw there, but also stepping back from the tactical perspective. As a relatively new hunter, I found it fascinating, and the book really arms you with information to help non-hunters understand the importance of hunting.
Yeah, and that's the goal. There's hunting college classes across America, and we're picking all of them and getting this accepted. It's a textbook. It's a college textbook. It can really be of value to understand that. And the key thing about hunting is we have always been in the middle of the food chain. That's important. The English or the British government in India says between 1900 and 1910, in that decade, over 100,000 people were killed by tigers. That's the ones you know about. And just 100,000 people, still around 1,000 a year are killed by tigers in India. So we've been in the middle of the food chain. We're able to be the predator or the prey.
Yeah.
But it's no fun to be the prey.
Yeah,
It's no
exactly.
fun to be hunted.
Well,
It's fun to be the hunter.
Heck
We
yeah.
don't want to be the hunted.
I read a book called Death in the Tall Grass, and I read it after I went to South Africa on a safari, and I'm kind of glad I read it after instead of before. You think that everything could kill you, but no. And I think that when you talk about being in the middle of the food chain, that goes back to on killing and all that stuff, and how we have to be able to kill, and we have to be very skillful at it, and we also have to manage it. We have to understand the psychological effect that the act of killing will do. And also, one of the things I really want you to talk about, because you hammer this one really well, is the difference between a legal or a lawful killing and a murder. Because some people think under no circumstances should you kill someone because God doesn't want us to kill people. Well, I would beg to disagree. And I believe you would as well.
And you know what? When I was doing my research for On Killing, I would present to World War II veterans reunions, Vietnam veterans reunions, and then I conduct interviews and surveys. And all those World War II vets are gone now. This was in the 1980s. So many of those Vietnam vets are gone now, yeah. But they would come up to me afterwards, and the "thou shalt not kill" thing was the most important that they got out of it. Now, they were 18-year-old kids drafted off the streets, ambushed some guy down there, no harm. And for them, it was a big deal because it's "you shall not murder." All the Jewish translation, original Hebrew, books originally in Hebrew, say "you shall not murder." Almost all the modern translations said "you shall not murder." The lawful use of deadly force to protect lives, over and over again, is validated. If you take "thou shalt not kill," it's absolutely out of context. To say, "Oh, we never kill anybody," it's not true. The reality is the using deadly force in a righteous cause is held up over and over again in the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament.
I bet that's very refreshing to officers or even military folks or private citizens who do have to, they're forced into a situation where they do have to use deadly force. I believe that they would find comfort in that, in that differentiation between murder and killing.
One of the key things in On Combat in Ukraine, brief window, being translated, was this perceptual distortion, tunnel vision, object exclusion, slow motion time. But the other thing is how to deal with it afterwards. 1 out of 5 have memory distortions. 1 out of 5 has something they just flat wasn't true that they remember. And that debriefing is a chance to say, no, man, that didn't happen. A Navy psychologist recently told me he was in country in Iraq, a Marine battalion in combat, a young Marine is wounded, and the doc's in country. So the squad is able to come and talk with this young Marine. And the Marine's eaten up. He said, I had a shot at this guy, and I didn't take the shot, and my buddy died because of it. And they said, dude, that never happened. They said, you weren't even in that sector. You was in your field of fire. It wasn't possible for that to happen. And could that squad held that Marine's life in their hands. And being able to say, no, man, that didn't happen. We just literally saved him from a lifetime of shame and despair. So that's the critical component, is that debriefing.
No, that's why you need to be careful too, because whether you're a police officer or whether you're being interviewed by police after a use of deadly force, you don't know what you're going to say. Your mind is not going to remember things correctly. I've watched body cam footage before and been like, well, I didn't remember it like that. And so there's a lot to be said for, and I think a lot of agencies now are like taking a step back, waiting for a detailed statement for 2 or 3 days till they have some sleep cycles. Yeah. And initially maybe just like a safety briefing, like, hey, it was a Hispanic male and a white male that ran off in that direction. I think they were armed. I fired rounds in that direction, just so we can account for everything and make sure that there's no, we're going to apprehend the suspects and that there's no collateral damage from bullets.
Yeah. And I speak at the NRA every year, and I tell them I'm one of the most successful peel out sessions, and I tell them, we want you to survive physically, spiritually, emotionally, and legally. In Texas, it's the law that the cop has the right to see every video before they make their written statement. If 1 out of 5 cops remember things that did not happen, tunnel vision, something right in front of you didn't see, memory gaps, memory distortions, how much more could it happen to you, Joe Citizen, who had to use a weapon? And we tell people, the cops are saying, you do not give a statement immediately after an incident. And your answer is, the cops now and their agencies. The answer is, I used deadly force. Here's the situation. I want to talk to my lawyer. Boom.
Yep.
And those are the magic words.
And
words. Cops are doing it. How much more so?
Exactly. And the body cams and the dash cams and every kind of, we have taser cams, all this stuff. But just because you can see that when you're sitting down evaluating the situation with 20/20 hindsight doesn't mean the officer perceived those things with his eyes during that moment. So those things can help you. But, I talked to one person who's an expert witness defending a police officer who used deadly force. He said he's going to have a heck of a hard time because to the jury or, whoever's going to be viewing this, it's going to look as though the guy dropped the gun and the officer fired another shot or whatever the case was. But he didn't perceive that. Just because you can see that when your heart rate's normal, resting, and you're watching this doesn't mean the officer can stop shooting that fast. So these things are very dynamic, and your research helps people, I think, to understand, to prepare for a deadly force encounter, and also to understand the aftermath, how to sort of care for themselves. But it also brings up good points as far as investigating these incidents, things to consider.
Yeah, here's the key on that. When you talk about it, when you think about it, your body goes back into sympathetic nervous system arousal. Your heart rate goes up. The body has had this dynamic of a terrible thing happen. And now if it happens again, boom, we're in combat mode. And sympathetic and re-experience of the event is not PTSD. It's so important people know that. The diagnostic criteria for PTSD, you have to have the symptoms for at least a month. It's normal to have all the things we call PTSD. It's normal in the first month. How you deal with it will decide whether or not it becomes a disorder. And by the way, most people come out with post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth. And those who do have PTSD were darn good at treating it, and they come out the other end with post-traumatic growth. And so that's our goal here, to come out the other end healthier, stronger from the experience.
Heck yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff that's going through my mind. I have so many questions to ask you. It seems a little disjointed, but I'm just going to throw it out there. So one of the things that was interesting to me about in On Killing was how the distance between you and your opponent can dictate the degree to which you are hesitant to kill. And at distance, maybe if you're a sniper and you're shooting a bad guy that's 300 yards away, it may be easier to pull the trigger. The opposite side of that spectrum would be in extreme close quarters. You're thrusting a knife into someone and essentially watching their life drain from their body. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. And also, I thought it was very interesting. I believe you compared like the Romans to some other warrior civilizations. The other ones did more hacking and slashing, whereas the Romans did more thrusting. And that's why they were more successful. But there's weird like sexual connotations to that as well. And I think we're really averse to doing that. So we have to understand that and train ourselves to overcome that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how distance may affect your ability to use deadly force.
Yeah. Well, let's come back around to hunting.
Okay.
And why it prepares us for combat. Because hunting, shots are usually, very seldom less than 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, and often more than that. But then you have to gut the deer. My little grandson, now he's deployed to Kuwait now, and so a little anymore. He was 7 years old. He goes to deer camp the first time. He comes home, grubby, dirty, spent a week out in the woods, got out of school for a week. His mom said, "What did you like the best?" He said, "Gutting the deer." For a 7-year-old boy, what was inside that deer was fascinating.
Yeah.
This is the liver and, the kidney and stomach, the lungs. You got the same stuff inside you.
Yes.
You smell the same inside. And the first time you are confronted with close range, what's happening to the body is positive. We took the back strap off. We slapped it on the grill, put some good sauce on, barbecue sauce, and right there, that deer was food in your stomach. And you get that positive assessment. So if you're up close and you see the killing dynamics, the blood, the gore, you should have previously experienced that.
Yes.
As a part of hunting.
Yes.
Over and over again. And if you can't handle that, then you shouldn't be a cop, shouldn't be a soldier, and you sure as heck, you got to think carefully about using deadly force.
Lieutenant Colonel, that's a very interesting point. And I did that just the opposite because I was a police officer for 20-something years, dealt with a lot of human death, right? Before I ever went out hunting. And then hunting is just like, oh, it's no big deal. I've seen humans in that condition. So, a deer is not going to traumatize me. But no, I think that's an absolutely excellent correlation between hunting and tactical stuff. So,
my dad was a cop in Cheyenne, Wyoming, 1962. No academy. Wyatt Earp needed no stinking academy. But it's really, it isn't until the 1970s the majority of American cops went to an academy. Hard to wrap your mind around that. What if we still did that? We got to have ever better technology, tactics, training just to say where we are. But the one thing they did do was send all the rookies to an autopsy. And Dad had grown up in the woods. He'd killed critters and shunned critters from his youngest days. And he said they were doing an autopsy on this guy, and the others were, they were kind of puking and gagging. He said, I thought it was fascinating. I wanted to see if what's inside a human was different than what's inside a critter. And he said, the reality is it's exactly the same. Other than the fur, the inside of you, the inside of a critter is exactly the same. So he was kind of going the other way around. He started as a hunter and confronted with that is another dynamic.
Another thing that you came up with that has really taken off is your sheepdog analogy. I mean, that is super prominent now in the tactical world. It's very fascinating. Talk a little bit about that and how that came to you.
It's fun because I actually have a U.S. government trademark for the term sheepdog as a protector. And when people all over America say, I'm going to be Sheepdog Detective Services, I said, I'll send a letter suitable for framing. authorizing you to use the term. Anybody just send me a letter or ping me and I'll send a letter suitable for framing, authorizing you to use the term, And but it began with on killing, and it was a very brief thing. It was an old veteran, lieutenant colonel, who talked about the fact that the world breaks out into the wolf and the sheep, and the sheepdog is the one to protect them. Now, just a sentence on that on killing really struck a chord. The veterans were all over that. The sheepdog became their model. And then really covered in detail in on combat, and we wrote the Sheepdog Kids book, which is really, really deep.
I haven't seen that. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, we'll get you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, and while we're at it, the second Sheepdog Kid was Why Mommy Carries a Gun.
Yeah, very cool.
So it really took off, and I think as a civilization, we love dogs. Now, people are more angry when a canine is killed than when a police officer is killed.
You're right.
And that's just the way we're wired.
Yeah.
Let me show you something right now. Sitting in my lap right now is Charlie.
Hey, Charlie.
Way fine, Charlie. There's everybody out there.
Charlie's a good boy.
Yeah. Charlie is actually my service dog. Now, here's the deal. He's what they call a hearing dog. My ears are going out. Can't sleep with the hearing aids in. So Charlie lets me know when the alarm goes off in the morning. Now, it was the simplest thing in the world to train him to do that. Most service dogs, and if you got any hearing problem, got any problem getting up in the morning, you need a Charlie. And it was just simplest thing in the world. The alarm goes off, I get up and give him a treat. Alarm goes off, give him a treat. Alarm goes off, we're making the alarm go off. And so when the alarm goes off, he's like, hey, where's my treat? He's in my face. No, we hit the snooze alarm. He never heard a snooze alarm. It's not in his language. Boom, he's merciless. And we're teaching him as I drive, if there's a siren. I say, oh, look, there's a siren. Give him a treat. The siren, if I don't catch the siren, he does. He lets me know. But the point is that we love dogs. And the idea of being a dog, we can handle it. And, I carried that a step further with on spiritual combat. And that part of it, we're talking about being God's faithful dog. God's so far above us. The idea of being on par is one of his, and when we get there, we will be beloved members of his family. For right now, it's all I can think about, just be God's dog. I want to be God's faithful dog. And that's really struck a chord with people, and we've run with it on that. And so the sequel to that book is on spiritual warfare. And Will Rogers, I said, if you think your man is some importance, try telling another man's dog what to do. Now, if you ever did that, the dog would look at you. If he'd talk, he'd say this: I don't know much. I'm just a dog. I know this. I'm not your dog. And from a spiritual standpoint, the evil one comes, you look in the eye and say, I'm not your dog. The evil one, I'm not your dog. So it's really traveled and evolved across all kinds of places.
It's crazy.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in law enforcement, when we would call each other a warrior, it was a compliment. It wasn't a derogatory thing. But with kind of the media's demonization of law enforcement and everything that happened, last several years around COVID and George Floyd and all this stuff, the media twisted that warrior term to be something negative, to be comparable to like a bloodthirsty savage, and they try to replace that word with guardian. Which, in a broad sense of the word, I think we're all guardians, right? We guard our family. We guard, if we're a police officer, we guard the people that live in the city or the county we're in. If we're deployed, we guard the lives of the U.S., right? U.S. citizens. But when it comes down to it, when you're talking about the situation where it's you or him, you don't want to be a guardian. You want to be a warrior. And so we stuck with that. We're like, nope, we like that terminology, and that's what we're sticking with.
Let me give you kind of an angle on this. This is the police officer at the Parkland school massacre in Florida. He sat outside while kids were murdered. He's in prison. He was acquitted, but he was charged because he was a guardian. And in a way, it's not his fault. He's got a left-wing sheriff who was voted out of office. We don't want warriors. We want guardians. He never wants to say, your job is to take a bullet for a kid. So here is the police chief and the SRO at Uvalde school massacre. They've been charged with over a dozen felonies. Now, it's still, their day of judgment is coming. And in a way, it's no fair. But every jury in Texas is probably going to nail them down. You know, this is the police chief, roly-poly, sweet little guy, got elected to the city council. He never in a million years thought, I'm going to have to take a bullet for a kid. I'm going to have to go in there and take a bullet for a kid. The SRO is out there. You know, in a way, not only did that guardian mindset part of the reason why Parkland, Florida school massacre happened, not only is the guardian political anti-warrior concept responsible for the loss of the life in this tragic event in Uvalde, Texas, it's also going to put those guys in jail.
Yeah.
And so we got to draw from both sides of the equation. That's why the sheepdog is really so effective in many ways.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. And, you know, a lot of the guys that are coming out of the police academy, they are getting beat into their heads so much. The idea that all situations can be de-escalated, which couldn't be the furthest from the truth. Not only does that endanger the officer and the citizens the officer is trying to protect, but that even is dangerous for suspects, because a lot of times a situation that could have been handled with a much lower degree of force, had the officer done something very early on, doesn't happen. They wait, they back up, they de-escalate. This emboldens the criminal, and pretty soon the officer's on his back, has a gun out, and has to resort to deadly force. Whereas if he'd done a takedown on the guy or kneed him in the abdomen or punched him in the face, it would have never got to that point. So what I would try, I was the defensive tactics supervisor of my department. What I would stress to these guys is, we're all experts at de-escalation. To think that cops don't de-escalate is ridiculous. I would have killed, 15 people. You know what I mean? If I didn't de-escalate, that's in our nature. Of course, we're going to do that, but that's not the solution to every problem. You know?
Yeah.
So,
let me give an angle on that too, on where this has all put us. Now, this whole, cops murdering innocent people out there, this is the number of people murdered, increase, decrease over time. And right there at the end, that's 2020. 2020 saw the single greatest explosion of homicides. Now, the number of people dead is held down by medical technology. Medical technology is holding down. It's actually worse than it looks. Year by year, the docs are saving everyone's life. Slap on a tourniquet, save a life. But 2020 was this explosion of violence like we've never seen before. And then 2021 is up another 4%, but 2021 was the all-time record number of cops murdered in the line. All-time record number of cops murdered. And the wheels are coming off the bus and we don't even know it. I'll show you another little chart that kind of makes this come alive. The same data, the per capita increase from the Pew, but they included the 9/11 attacks. Here's 9/11, bounced back the next year. Here's 2020. It didn't bounce back the next year. So let me give an angle. This whole idea that the cops are evil. The media, this was in the New York Times, but they said, oops, that points a finger right back at us. And they never talked about it again. But here we have two different crime reports going on out there. One is what the police report to the FBI. The other is the crime victim survey. And every year we call thousands of people and we say, were you victim of an assault? Were you victim of a robbery, a rape? Now, so we have two crime reports. One is what the cops report, or what people tell the cops about, what they call the cops for. Well, what happened is they don't call the cops. The cops aren't even there. The murder is still being counted, but murder is held down by medical technology. So let's take a look here. This is 22 versus 23 crime data. And here's total violent crime. The UCR, cops say down 2%. Survey says up 75%. Now there's murders. It's the crazy thing about this. Decade after decade, we call thousands of people, never once somebody, yep, I was a victim of homicide, never once. The homicide victims, they can't speak for themselves. We're going to speak to them. Hey, but here's rape, down 6%. Survey says up 58%. Robbery, 1%, 47%. Here's a biggie, ag assault. Ag assault, cops say down 2%. Survey says up 104%. We have never seen such a disparity between what cops are reporting, because it's not being reported to them. Right? They fear the cops. They hate the cops. Unless he's dead, just leave the cops out of it. Unless he has to go to hospital to treat his wounds, the cops don't even in the flow. And so the price that was paid for this anti-warrior, anti-cop dynamic is overwhelming. But good news, January was tied for the lowest number, this January 2025, was tied for the lowest number of cops shot in line of duty. And that's the Trump mindset. That's just the leadership. You know, in January, recruiting in the military has been terrible. And then January of 2025 was the best recruiting month the Army's seen in 15 years. So leadership can turn the tide. Leadership can start pushing it the other way around. The cops are the good guys. The criminals are not the good guys.
Yeah, piggybacking on what you just said, you know, when the cops were demonized, when it was at its height, there's a nationwide trend, which I'm sure you're intimately familiar with, called depolicing. So cops just didn't want to do anything because they didn't feel that they had the support of their administration in many cases. They knew they didn't have the support of, you know, the media, and they didn't want to just do their job and maybe perhaps make some small mistake and then be on the 11 o'clock news, and then everybody, you know, you have to move and you have to change your identity and everything because people want to come after your family and stuff, all because in the heat of the moment, you made a decision that was later deemed to be maybe not the best decision you can make. So what that does is that emboldens criminals. I mean, if you're not out there being proactive as cops, what you're doing is you're giving a green light to criminals. And so the people that think they want, you know, to demonize the cops, they're hurting themselves. I mean, nobody benefits from that because cops don't do their job. The criminals are going to step up and fill that gap, you know? And then there's that hesitancy, right? There's that hesitancy to use force, especially maybe if a cop is of one nationality and he's dealing with someone of a different color and he doesn't want to do what he knows he's supposed to do because he's going to second guess and he's going to hesitate. And maybe that is going to cost him his life. And that's unbelievable. That should not happen. And no one should be targeted because of their ethnicity, but you should also not give anyone a pass because of their ethnicity. That's just completely wrong.
And here's what this means to you, the listener. Here's what it means to you, the cop, you, the citizen. It's really, really bad. You need to arm yourself. You need to protect your loved ones. You need to train. You need to have a gun. You need to go to the range. I tell people, you know, I train the Secret Service. I am my family's Secret Service. My family deserves the same protection the president does. And when I'm willing to train and carry, they have the same protection the president. That's the great freedom of our nation, that every life is precious and every life is worthy of armed security if you're willing to do it.
Yeah, and you need to be responsible for yourself and your loved ones, because even if the officers are well trained, and most are well intended, they may not be there in time. You're not going to have that window of opportunity. That's like thinking, you know, I'll put on my seatbelt before I get in a crash type of thing. You know what I mean? To think that the officers are going to be there to save you. It's just most of them really want to, but they just might not have the ability to do that. So
yeah let's go back to that defund the police thing and think it through. No cops. Get rid of all the cops. That's their agenda. Empty all the prisons. That's their agenda. What would it be like? Well, you ever seen anybody? A lot of people heard of the movie The Purge. And The Purge turned off the murder law for one day. Now, The Purge didn't empty all the prisons. The Purge didn't turn off all laws. The Purge is just a tiny peek of what it'd be like. It would be chaos and despair. And we'd never put the pieces back together again. We can go a day without food. We can go a day without water. One day without justice. We've never put the pieces back together again. The only thing we do more than justice is the air that we breathe. And so believe in who you are, whether you're an armed citizen or you're a cop or any place else. Believe in who you are. Believe in what you do. You are what's right and strong and true and good about our nation from our youngest days.
And you are the good guy. You're not going to do things to
let's
prey
talk about
on the
that.
weak. You know?
That where that came from, it's this Marxist concept that world breaks down in two parts, the oppressor and the oppressed. And the oppressor can do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
The oppressed is always the bad guy.
Mm.
So in Israel, the Israelis are the oppressor. And they raped and slaughtered and killed, you know, as many people as we lost at Pearl Harbor. The October 7th attack did to Israel. And the idea that they deserved it. They deserved to have their children slaughtered. They deserved to be raped and murdered. So when that happened in Pearl Harbor, we declared war. We bombed Tokyo over 2 nights of firebombing Tokyo. We killed 100,000 people. We nuked 2 nations. We starved a nation when Pearl Harbor killed about the same amount of people in a military target. Same things happened to Israel. And so we've got to understand this, the idea that that it's okay for them to do that because Israel's the oppressor and these are the oppressed. And that's the same mindset with our criminals. The criminals are oppressed and the cops are the oppressors. And there's some value in that model, used carefully, but it's been carried to an extreme, and we got to realize where they're coming from. Yeah. It's sick. Yeah, and we got to stand up for it every step of the way, confront it.
It really is. Another thing that's sick and it's hard to even talk about, but we need to talk about it, is school shootings. And I know you are an absolute wealth of knowledge on this stuff, but people are wondering what the solution is. Do you have armed teachers at the school? Do you have SROs assigned to every school? That's kind of like the response to the crisis. But I'd like you to talk a little bit also about prior to the crisis, like what, kind of like you did in On Killing, as far as talking about the things that you can watch for in kids that's going to desensitize them to the act of killing.
Well, let's begin with our language, because we call these a shooting. Mm-hmm. Shooting is an Olympic sport.
Yes. Shooting
as our constitutionally protected right. Shooting basketballs makes millions of dollars. Shooting a movie, TV show gets Emmys, Oscars. Cowboys shoot, soldiers shoot in movies, always brave and courageous. In every other context, the word shooting is positive. So we call these massacres shooting. We can't even call them what they are. And you should be a little ticked off every time you hear a mass murder, a massacre, a murder called a shooting. Cops are the shooters. They are the killers, the murderers. Cops are law-abiding. The criminal is the bad guy. And so our very language is programming us to think shooting's evil. And we got to confront it and get rid of it. We, across America, active shooter response. We've been real busy during deer season. So the whole idea that guns are evil and the shooting is the bad part and the shooter's a bad guy, it's anti-gun propaganda coming to our mouth. Every time we call a criminal act a shooting. When do we stop using the word massacre and murder, homicide, multiple homicide? In our book on spiritual warfare, we talk about an article in a NIJ science paper about how we're taking these shooters and we're giving them positive connotations, and they use the word shooter. They never want to use the word murder or killer. The whole article talked about how we're giving them positive connotations, constantly calling them this positive term. They're shooters. The Parkland, Florida school killer, he said, "I'm going to be the next school shooter." He embraced that word. He didn't say, "I'm going to commit murder, I'm a master, I'm going to be a shooter." So we can't even call these crimes what they are. And it's anti-gun propaganda coming out of our mouth. And what if he hasn't fired yet? Oh, he wasn't shooting. He's not an active shooter. And so this whole business traps us to understand how much the media has brainwashed us and by controlling our language. But let's step back then and talk about what does happen, because this is huge. Dr. John Lott is a Harvard economist, did amazing work. I had the honor to co-present with the man one time. And he had an article just a couple of months ago you'll come to me, real-time politics or real-time. Yeah. Look up Dr. John Lott, arming school teachers. He says, now let's back up. I tell my audiences that nobody can keep track of all the solo homicides, but I think I've been able to keep track of every multiple homicide in our schools nationwide. And with 3 exceptions, every one of the multiple homicides, there was not a cop in the school. With 3 exceptions, if there's a cop in the school, it's about the best guarantee it's not going to happen. Now, the 3 exceptions were like the one recently in Georgia, then we had one in Oxford, Michigan, one in Santa Fe, Texas, and all 3 times there was a cop on scene, but the minute they got there, not another kid died. The greatest achievement of the crime that didn't happen. But John Lott says, other than a suicide or a murder in the parking lot after hours, there has never been a loss of life in a school with armed educators. Now, Utah has been doing this for over a quarter of a century, ever since Columbine. See, in Utah, concealed carry in the school and concealed carry, the same thing. Why would the rule change when you get in the school? I'm allowed to carry a gun everywhere else. I walk in the school, I can't carry a gun. Why would the law change? So Utah, if you're allowed to carry a gun out there, you're allowed to carry a gun in here. Utah's had armed educators over a quarter of a century, 100% success. Ohio, for closing on 2 decades now, Ohio has 85% of all schools, school districts in Ohio have some armed educators. Now, the program they teach has been, a lot of other states are running it, grabbing it. It's called FASTER, Faculty and Staff Training Emergency Response. Great training. It's just a little less than a week. But you have to arrive with marksmanship skills. We're not going to teach you how to shoot. You have to be nominated by your fellow teachers. You have to be approved by your leadership. And these people in the schools, 100% success. Now, a judge said, back up, a New York, or a London Times reporter came and saw the training. And he said in the London Times, I never thought I would say this, having seen the people taking the training, having taken the training, I now support the idea of armed educators in American schools.
Yeah.
London Times, buried on page 5 and never mentioned again. Every time you get to armed educator, like something goofy or crazy.
Yeah.
After the Parkland, Florida massacre, that's what they did.
And I think that some of that is just like the perception that a lot of these teachers are very liberal and they don't want to, they don't have the capability of violence. You know what I mean? They don't have a violent bone in their body or whatever. But yeah, if they're armed and they're prepared with some of the stuff like that your teachings would provide them with, in other words, they understand that they're going to have these feelings. They understand that they're going to have auditory exclusion, that they're going to have tunnel vision, all these things. And if they're trained, then yeah, I mean, I think that it could definitely save lives, you know?
We're not going to make them carry a gun.
Yeah.
We're just the ones who are willing and trained, we can use them.
Well, like we were doing active shooter response training,
Right.
active killer response training
Right.
at the police department a few years ago. And I remember I was in the restroom and I heard one of the teachers saying to another teacher that, yeah, I couldn't, I couldn't, how do you say it? I couldn't injure a kid even if he was hurting other kids. And I'm like, you have one kid who's committing a violent, murderous act on other kids who are innocent, and you can't use violence to stop that kid. But everybody's got a different makeup, and some people,
Let me give
like
you an
you
angle on
said,
this. I do in-service teaching to school districts, and I'm really, really successful. Sometimes standing ovation educators. Educators say, I've seen in-service training for 30 years, never seen educators give a standing ovation. But I tell them in the Sandy Hook school massacre, 2 classrooms of first graders slaughtered. The first one to die was the principal, female who just charged the killer. What did she think? Dawn Hochsprung's her name, Dawn Hochsprung, who just charged the killer. What did she think she's going to do? In the Nashville Covenant School massacre, we had the first one to die was a janitor. This is the girl that shot out the glass and crawled in. And the first one to die was a janitor, but the next one to die was another female principal who just charged the killer. What did she think she's going to do? So a principal told me one time, elementary principal, she said, I will die for my children tomorrow. And she's right. It's in your genes to die for your children. She said, I will die for my children tomorrow. Give me something besides my keys in my hand when that day comes.
She has the mindset. She just needs the tools and the training to be able to carry that out. Because if you're going to charge someone who's armed and you're unarmed to protect your kids, that's a warrior. That's a warrior mindset right there. But they need to couple that with, like you said, having an ability to stop the threat, other than just hoping. But I will say this too, Virginia Tech all those years ago, I was writing at the time a column for officer.com, and I was out mowing the lawn, and the editor called and said, hey, I need your ideas about Virginia. I'm like, well, what happened at Virginia Tech? Then when I look at it, I say, had there been, and I don't know if there was, but had there been some football players, some wrestlers or whatever in that class that were capable, and had they worked in unison, they could have had an effect on target. Now, here's the thing. We don't send our kids to school to face active killers, right? I mean, we don't do that. But that doesn't negate the fact that should they find themselves in a situation like that, if they can, there are things they can do. If there's multiple people in this room, able-bodied people, and there is someone in there with a firearm, yeah, you may get shot, but you're absolutely going to get shot if all you do is cower and stay in place, because you're literally a sitting duck. But if you move, and if you move with a purpose and you have some sort of plan, your odds go up tremendously. So that's what people, I think, need to understand.
The RAND research group, RAND.org, RAND.org, had a paper released about 5 years ago on saving lives. And every single time a group of individuals charged the killer from multiple directions, they were successful. I mean, every single time a group of individuals charged the killer from multiple directions, they were successful. But I'll give you an angle. I was there after Virginia Tech. I had a chance to debrief the TAC team. I was in the building that it was in had the old style double crash bar doors. And the killer chained the door shut from the inside and trapped everybody in the building. And he began his massacre. So I talk about run, hide, fight. And the first step is run. And on one of the second floor classroom, Professor Levi Labrescu, an elderly, frail man, a Holocaust survivor. He heard the gunshots. I believe he smelled it. And he knew what was happening. He stepped in the hallway. He knew what was happening. He's the only one in the building. You know, when you start shooting, that smell just penetrates the entire building. And he knew what was happening. And the only way to get out, he's only ones got out of the window was his classroom, because he had to lift the entire window casement out of the wall. He didn't know how to do it, and a couple of strong college kids. And he had his kids jump out that second floor window. Now, 2 students either wouldn't jump or didn't have time. We don't know, because they're dead and he's dead. He died blocking the door with his body. So there's run. He had a plan. He executed the plan. And for those got out the window, 100% success. And then hide. I was there. I was the guest of the ROTC program. And one of the ROTC students told me that he was in the classroom when it happened. And gunshots, it's clear what's happening. You're smelling it. He said, nobody's doing anything. They got on the phone and called friends. And he said, so I got up and I took a table, one of the normal foldable classroom tables, and set it on its side facing the door. And then I got another table, and then the professor started to help him, and put the table normal-wise, and then a table on top of that facing the door. When the killer got to that classroom, opened the door, he's looking at the face of 2 tables. He kicks it, he shoots it, he leaves, not another person died. Now there's run, there's hide. Now fight. In one of the classrooms, what the killer would do was he'd come in and he'd kill the professor and then start killing the students. And in every single case, they either sat there and did nothing, or they ran in a corner and waited to die. One of the classrooms, an ROTC, is just months away from becoming a military officer. Now, he's in the back left corner. Matt Laporte's his name. He's in the back left-hand corner. We know that because that's where his backpack and stuff was. And the only way out is an aisle running down, for him, it's down the left-hand side. And he shoved past everybody. He came to the corner, took a hard right, and charged the killer. Took another hard right. And to me, the most heart-wrenching crime scene photograph of Virginia Tech is Matt Laporte, dead on his face, arms outstretched in his cadet gray uniform, in a classic football tackle position with 8 bullet wounds in his body. If just one other person had charged the killer, if just one other person had taken action, could have been a different story. And so the problem is, we taught our kids, don't fight, nobody fights. And there's value in that. When I was a kid, we'd get in a fight, next day we're friends. The day you get in a fight, the next day somebody brings in a gun. We've got to teach our kids it's a time when you can fight, this time when you must fight. And run, hide, fight. A lot of us remember stop, drop, and roll. Stop, drop, and roll, catch on fire, stop. That was controversial. You can't teach that to kindergartners. They have nightmares about it. No, they don't have nightmares. And we teach our kids run, hide, fight, and they know what to do. And the time when you can fight, this time when you must fight. And so kind of wrap it up with another case study. I was at the Indiana School Resource Officers Association summer conference. And this teacher was being awarded by the SROs, an honorary police officer, given a badge. And he was a middle school football coach, a science teacher. And he told his students, if anybody ever comes in this room with a gun, I'm going to take the first bullet, and I expect you to be right behind me. He had a plan. He committed the plan. He executed the plan. Kid walked with a pistol. The coach popped a basketball in his face. He had a basketball on the desk. He popped it in the kid's face and charged it. Coach was hit in the legs twice, fully recovered. He tackles him and a half a dozen other kids on top and stripped the gun and then game over. Nobody died that day. He had a plan. He communicated the plan. He executed the plan.
Amazing.
And run, hide, fight.
What people need to understand, people think, well, I can't do anything if this guy has a gun. Well, no, you can do something, just like the basketball thing. Because imagine you're at the range and the timer goes off and you're drawing and shooting. Now imagine you're doing that and someone's throwing a basketball in your face. You're going to probably bobble your draw. You're not going to get your rounds on target. And that's the exact experience that we want the bad guy to have. So anything you can do, anything that's within your reach, a coffee cup. Now, you can't just throw a basketball and stand there, right? You have to follow that up with some movement toward and closing on the adversary. Another thing, too, that's very interesting. One thing I wanted to get your take on is it's the whole OODA thing as well, right? If everybody's just sitting there and cowering, what's to stop this guy from just killing everybody until he runs out of ammunition, right? Versus if 3 or 4 people are running at this dude and throwing staplers and stuff at him, right? Computers, laptops, whatever, then now he can't focus on his targets because he is now, it's the old kind of proverbial like predator to prey thing. He's worried about his own self-preservation, right? And it's going to pause him long enough to hopefully stop him from shooting anybody else.
Yeah.
Killing anybody
one
else.
thing about, we talked about tunnel vision. And everybody, with very few exceptions, has tunnel vision. Some are aware of it, some are not. If you're not videotaping the training, you're missing the majority of the learning. Oh, that guy's right in front of me. I never saw it. That's right. It's tunnel vision, and you didn't even know it was happening. Bad guys have tunnel vision too. Rapid lateral movement is essential. When we do a drill in Jiu-Jitsu, we sidestep, draw, and shoot. And a sidestep, rapid sidestep, stable platform, shoot. And to get your black belt, you've got to do that in like a 0.8 seconds or something along that line. Just sidestep, draw, and shoot. And I believe every draw should have a sidestep built into it. Left, right, rapid lateral movement. Bad guys have tunnel vision too. It is almost universal in combat. And so use it.
And
rapid lateral movement.
And you're hitting it very well too. A guy I train with a lot, Dave Spalding, is a very prominent firearms instructor. He was a 2010 Law Enforcement Trainer of the Year. He says exactly what you say. He calls it dynamic lateral movement. Now, a lot of times at the range, we're just kind of doing this little lackadaisical step one. Now, that ain't it. It's got to be explosive. You create that opportunity to draw or to get to cover while you draw or whatever else at least you're making the bad guy have to reorient to you, right? That's what it's about. So, yeah.
Bad guys have tunnel vision too.
Cool stuff. Hey, one thing I want to talk about is what advice would you have as far as managing fear? Like you're in this violent situation or potentially violent situation. Talk a little bit about what you can do as far as maybe, I know you have a very specific breathing protocol that you teach, and what can someone do when they're in the moment? I'm not talking about preparing prior to them being in the situation, but when they're in the situation, what types of things can they do to help them manage fear so that they can perform optimally?
Yeah. Let's back up a step on this because it's really important. Now, I asked my audience, or begin every class, how many kids killed by school fire in the last 50 years? 0. Half the cost of the building goes in a fire code. Half the cost of modern building goes fire code. The most expensive thing in the building is a fire sprinkler system under pressure lifetime building. Double the electrical system, fireproof material. We're not even counting the fire hydrant. We're not counting the fire alarm, separate network of combo and water. But what have we done to prepare for violence? We'll put a sign up front that says no guns allowed. Now there's a reason for this. How many kids killed by school violence? Too many, ever more. But there's a reason for this. We can accept the idea that a fire would happen. The idea that somebody's so evil they would come and kill is just too hard. And here's what you understand. Interpersonal human aggression is the single most psychologically toxic thing any human being ever faced. Don't cop a pity party here, but put it in perspective. The DSM, the Bible of psychiatry, psychology, talking about PTSD, says whenever the cause of your trauma is human in nature, the degree of trauma usually more severe and long-lasting. So you tell me now, 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, tornado hits a house while you're gone, put your family in the hospital. How do you feel about that? Well, thank God they're alive. Scenario 2, criminals break into the house and beat your family in the hospital stay. Any different? It's all the difference in the world. See, that's why one serial killer can paralyze a city. And you understand that. So interpersonal human aggression is so corrosive, so toxic. Don't have a pity party now. Be prepared for it. So what do we got to do? Well, here's what, Texas needs gun laws. No, they don't. What they need to do, they passed a law, and Uvalde, exterior door unlocked, interior door unlocked. 2 doors unlocked. The guy that did the security study about several months earlier, I don't know why I'm doing these security studies. The south and north doors are always unlocked. People step out to have a smoke, prop the door open. So state law, every door in every school will be shut and locked all the time. How much that cost? How much that cost? You know, we had 5 kids. He told my mom, buckle those kids up. She said it wasn't possible. They made it thought, boom, we got it done. Yet the fire code's the law. Keep the stinking door shut. It's the law, number 1. Number 2, put the laminate film on any glass on the door beside the door. Interior door, exterior door. And you can shoot holes in it. You ain't getting through that. Now, if you got something you can heave a rock through and kick and reach in, that's not the critter. People across Texas are selling some stuff that ain't doing the job, and there's going to be accountability. There's people doing the real stuff. You can shoot holes in it. You ain't getting through there anytime soon. You ain't busting through that window. Now, in the Sandy Hook school massacre, 2 classrooms of first graders slaughtered. Our kids are safe. We lock the doors. It's glass. He shot out the glass, opened the door, and murdered 2 classrooms of first graders. A couple $100 laminate film. They'd all be alive today. Make it the law. The text made it the law. Number 1, doors locked. Number 2, laminate film. Number 3, there will be somebody in every school that can shoot back. Now, we ain't got enough cops to fill the slots we got. We're all under strength. How are you going to do that? There's only one answer: training armed educators. Florida, after the Parkland, Florida school massacre, same thing. There will be somebody in every school that can shoot back. And so this is not rocket science. We keep our kids safe from fire. No, we've got to make it the law. You want to get it done. You make them lock the door, they're safe for a day. Make it the law, they're safe from now on. But the reason why is because they can't wrap their mind around it. And so we have to prepare for it. Like stop, drop, and roll. Run, hide, fight. Keep the doors locked. We can do this. But we've got to accept the reality of these evil things that are happening out there, and that you are the protector, and that you have the tools and you have the skills to protect yourself and your loved ones.
Awesome stuff, man. I'm sure I can continue to ask you questions and talk to you forever, but I really appreciate your time today. Before we wrap up, tell people where they can go to get information on all the things you have going on, which is crazy. I don't know how you keep up with the schedule that you do. And also kind of like what you think they should start out with. Is On Killing kind of the way to start? Or I know you have like on killing, I think I said. I hope I didn't say online killing, but I've started to say you have some online training that people can do as well. So just tell us a little bit about what you have going and how people can get access to the information that you've amassed.
My website is GrossmanOnTruth.com.
Okay.
The truth on killing, the truth on combat, right? GrossmanOnTruth.com. All the books are listed there. We got our store. We'll personalize them for you. Just put a little note, personalize them and sign them, and get you whatever, and free shipping. And you can order them through Amazon. That's always good too. Look at my Amazon page and look at the things that are available. But we got GrossmanOnTruth.com. There's a link there to my online classes. There's an on killing class and on combat class online. Pick up some semester credit hours, work all the way through the book. You get an e-copy of the book as part of the class. All that's there. The book is good to begin with. The sequence they were written in was on killing, and I think the most important one of all, cut to the chase, on combat, the book I wrote for my kid. And you want to tie it all together on hunting, about who we are and what we do, and then if you take any kind of a spiritual dynamic, it's this one. And I'll give you an angle on that. In the business we're in, we've seen a lot of bad stuff. That's what our job is. If you're first responder, every bad thing that happens, it's your job to go to it. And you can't help. This is not a religious thing. It's an existential question. It's really important. How could a loving God allow these terrible things to happen? And it's really important. And the answer is we're not God's puppets. A loving God will not hang over your shoulder like some helicopter parent every day of every life, keeping you safe. Eventually, we're all going to die. No matter how every kind of die. Did God fail? No. You see, you ever heard if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's truly yours. That's how much God loves us. He loves us enough to let us make our own decision. That means a lot of people make really bad decisions. A lot of bad things happen. You say, God wanted you to do something. He said, I did. I sent you. So that's kind of that dynamic. And I wrap up by saying, I'm 68 years old. My wife of 49 years, my high school sweetheart, waiting for me back at home. I've been on the road for 27 years, 24 years in the Army, conjugal visit, clean underwear, back on the road. Because the only thing more precious than my bride, our children, our grandchildren. You know, my grandson's got a great girl he's looking at. Maybe we'll be great-grandparents in the blink of an eye. And we believe if we love our God, if we love our nation, if we love our children, we give 100%. That's what love means. Love means the worse it gets, harder you fight. You know what makes a great cop? Is empathy. Empathy is love with the shoes on. What if it was my son that had been murdered? What if my spouse had been assaulted? What if my dad laying there needing CPR? Empathy is love in action. Empathy is love with the shoes on. And I tell you, if we love our God, if we love our nation, if we love our way of life, we love our kids, we give 100%. That's what love means. Love means the worse it gets, harder you fight. And I'm 68, and I think I can stay in the fight for another 20, 30 years. That's my goal. Why? Because I love my nation. I love my God. I love my wife. And love means the worse it gets, harder you fight. So all that's on the website, GrossmanOnTruth.com, little nuggets and tools. And I do people know it. I wrap up with a big love as the opposite of evil. The evil with the line drawn through it and big love. And then John 13:16, greater love is known than I sign it. So we sell those on our website. And you just pick up one of those, send them to you, but it comes down to love.
Your work is saving lives, and I know it's not easy being on the road as often as you are. It helps when you're passionate about what you do, which you clearly are. But I firmly believe that your research is saving people's lives, and it's making them better prepared to deal with violence. So, thank you so much again, brother. I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today.
God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you, sir. That's a wrap for this episode with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Be sure and check out his website, like and subscribe to the Aimpoint Taking Aim podcast, and we'll see you next time.